Merci beaucoup, and thank you to Aliocha and to Kantuta for organizing this mad series. I took the invitation of staging a provocation quite seriously, this idea of friction diplomatique. So what you will see is an attempt to invite all of us to play a game. And I think all games, the more seriously you take them, the more fun they are. So I am very conscious that I am inviting you, many of you, to do something that you will be quite uncomfortable doing, something you don't usually do, or when you do it under duress, under some type of pressure. What I try to do is also something that is short, performative, meaningful, hopefully short, and then I will show 4 images only, and then we can talk. The video that we will use to sing is 5 minutes long. Le video est 5 minutes seulement. And I will read a short text about it. It's part of a longer series called Abstract Nationalism and National Abstraction. Abstraction nationale et nationalisme abstrait. The Pavilion of Greater Mexico, or Mexicains sans frontières. Mexicains sans frontières sounds very funny in English because we say Médecins sans frontières tout le temps. Mais Mexicains sans frontières, c'est politiquement plus compliqué. Il y a des médecins mexicains sans frontières, mais c'est autre chose. Il y a besoin d'un visa pour ça. So in late 2014, 7 finalist teams of artists and curators were asked to compete to represent Mexico at its new permanent pavilion for the 56th Venice Biennale. Aware of the fact that we were the only chosen team living beyond Mexico's borders, curator Joaquin Barrientos and I created a proposal directly addressing the Mexican diaspora, as well as its relationship to globalization. While the proposal that included the Pavilion of Greater Mexico was not ultimately chosen to represent our country in Venice, this initial segment of Friction Diplomatique provides an ideal context to introduce the work to the European public. The work's political, intellectual, and emotional range is best served by performing a simple collective experiment. Similar ones have already happened at the Phillips Collection and the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C., only a few months ago. So here are a bit of the rules of the game. The invitation is quite simple. We will all sing, and the lyrics are under at the bottom, like a sing-along, like karaoke. And you don't have, there are 3 languages. We don't speak all 3 languages, most of us, so just, you can pronounce it however you can. Just feel free. Feel free to butcher the language, do whatever you want with the language. But let's try to follow the different languages. So everybody's invited to sing all 3 languages. So participation is simple and short, but it will require everyone's active involvement. Please stand up if you're a Mexican citizen or if you understand Spanish. Los que hablan español o son ciudadanos mexicanos, que por favor se paren. Ajá. Please stand up if you're a United States citizen or if you understand English. Please stand up if you're a French citizen or if you understand French. Si vous êtes un citoyen français ou vous parlez français. Please stand up if you are not standing already. Est-ce que vous pouvez... Okay. We will now proceed. Aliocha will start playing, to sing the United States and Mexican anthems in their new form, adapted to the reality of Greater Mexico and the Greater Mexico Pavilion. The first round is only in English to warm up. Merci beaucoup, je crois que c'est un bon expériment. I can't see the images from here, but, well, I will just... that was the meat of the dinner. But I wanted, because of so many conversations that we've had since yesterday and today revolve around the idea of how we restructure, those of us who don't consider the current global order a just system, how we are inventing, or how we may invent a different order, how we're restructuring. And so for me, there are two operations that are essential. One is honest and accurate observation. And what I mean is not scientific accuracy, but human, between each other, collective observation of what surrounds us. Not letting other people dupe us, but also not deceiving each other. So there's this ethics of observing our world and seeing how it's operating. And that's, artists, I think, have done that for many centuries, but other people have done that too. Everyday people who don't have professions related to observation, but of course scientists do it all the time, and so many of the Latour comments have been quite helpful with that. But there's also imagination, and imagination and observation have a really key relationship to memory. And so one of the questions that I've been asking myself for many years now, but it became very pressing when I was in Haiti in 2009, before the earthquake, doing a project there for this first edition of the Ghetto Biennale. For over a year, we were trying to convince people around the world, from artistic, curatorial, and critical circles, to come to Haiti to work with these artists in the Grand Rue, this slum of Port-au-Prince, with amazing artistic and political production. There was very little attention. Only about 20 people came from from around the world. It was still worth doing, very, very, very wonderful event, but it was problematic. It was intentionally provocatively called a Biennale. It was certainly not a biennial like we tend to think of them. But so that was that. And then I moved back. I went back to my home with my wife and oftentimes collaborator. And the earthquake happened. Hundreds of thousands of people disappeared. Many of our collaborators died, or we had no idea where they were, many of them children or young people. And at that point, a week later, Haiti becomes the world's attention falls on Haiti. And this means that in the news media, you would hear in the United States of Haiti being described as a fourth front for the US military. Right? So Iraq, Afghanistan, so there was basically, and you think, how does a humanitarian crisis become a front for the military? So this is one question in my head at the time. The other thing that happened was that Holland Cotter from the New York Times discovered Haitian art. He wrote several pages on the very artists that for over a year we were trying to, tell people these are great artists. And so he wrote a long piece, and all of a sudden people were coming to Haiti to see these artists. The third thing that happened is these artists get a pavilion in the Venice Biennale. It was a shipping container, but still, they called it a pavilion. And these were, again, the very artists. And so when I observed, of course, most of us who had participated in the Ghetto Biennale were mostly occupied in trying to help, basically figuring out how to deal with the tragedy, But a year later or so, I realized this is something you have to address. This is something that has to be, And of course, I had read Naomi Klein's Disaster Capitalism, many other writings of that sort, and I think it's really important readings. But I wanted to do a project that was active about it. So I started a series called Art Biennials and Other Global Disasters. And so that's the images that you see. This is the first version of it in Beirut, in Lebanon. So at the Biblos Bank Gallery, we did these banners that look very corporate, where I pair in each banner one biennial or international art event with a global disaster. So Venice, Chernobyl, Istanbul, Bhopal, there's Sharjah, Kanungu. And very often what happens, one of the core questions for me, and that brings me back to observation and imagination, is that memory is a key connector between those two. and collective memory, but also individual memory. And so I wanted to ask myself, what makes a global event memorable? Right? We tend to think that Venice matters. Why does it matter? Does anybody know what Kanungu is, for example? What happened in Kanungu? I didn't before I started researching. The largest collective suicide in human history. Over 1,000 people committed suicide in 2 days in Kanungu in Uganda. I would think that should be relevant for global history, for kind of, and maybe even for global cultural production, but we don't. We kind of, many things get erased, and Boaventura Sosa de Santos spoke about that yesterday, these abysmal, these abysmal lines, and so in a way, there's an abysmal line between the top name and the bottom name. But very often, if you go to the next image, there's only 4 of these. And next one, that's the opening in Beirut. So, and when I do one, I invite local artists to do projects in relation to disaster, or to whatever they want, And so this is what's going to happen in the next edition of the Bienal de La Habana. I'm doing something for the Pabellón Cuba, which are going to be the monumental banners, but about a dozen of them. And in that version is called Islands of Tragedy and Disaster. And so we're basically using this trope of fantasy island as this neoliberal fantasy to speak of this dark side of neoliberalism, But if you look at, for example, the one on the right is Havana, Fukushima, Sharjah, Kanungu, Sao Paulo, and the subtropical convergence zone. Does people know this? It's a man-made island of sorts, but it's not Saadiyat Island. It's basically where all the trash collects in the Atlantic Ocean. It's the size of an island, right? And so why does the creation of the island not become a global memorable event? Kassel Banqiao. Kassel, Documenta, we all think Documenta matters, do we? Well, maybe not. But Banqiao, Banqiao was a totally preventable, almost 30,000 people died in one day in China because a dam was not fixed. Even though for 2 decades people were being told, fix the dam, fix the dam, fix the dam. Of course, global histories, but often what happens is these colonial assumptions, and I will end with that. People see Dakar, London, and we had already someone like McKee talking about Dakar, People see Dakar, London, and they think, oh, Dakar must be the disaster, and London must be the art event. Is it London freeze, or what is it? No, it's the London smokes. Does anybody know of the London smokes of 1952? In one day, several hundred people died in London from pollution. They dropped dead. But this has been erased from our collective history. We think of China as this place of like mad neoliberal, pollution, production. Those Chinese, they don't know how to do it. If they only learn from, This 1952 is the same epoch where it's part of, many people are still alive from that generation, So for me, it's an ongoing series in that wherever the project happens, I invite others to think of these pairings of what do you consider a memorable cultural event, and what do you consider a memorable, it doesn't have to be a disaster necessarily, but one association that, going back to the Haiti example, I do think we can compare, is these massive apparatuses, which we haven't talked a lot about. Magiciens de la Terre is important, but actually I don't think those exhibitions are as important. To me, what's important to observe is these massive infrastructures that can descend on a place. Kassel is a city of 5,000 people. It's a town, it's a village. For 100 days, 750,000 people come to Kassel. That's like Port-au-Prince after the earthquake, right? Of course, it's not the tragic side, it's the suprastructure of capitalism, it's the happy side. But so I think it may be worthwhile, like thinking how those very infrastructures of speed, and culture and militarism actually do overlap. And I think that's it, yep.